Hello adventure lover. This is my story of learning to paraglide in Australia and the incredible adventures and the challenges that came with it. So a few years ago, I gave up conventional life and I hit the road. I spend my time travelling around in a caravan or travelling overseas, having as many adventures as possible. Now that I'm an adventure bum, I have to operate on a tight budget. So whatever adventurous activities I do, they need to be of low cost. I used to fly when I was younger. I used to fly fixed-wing aircraft, helicopters and sailplanes. But frankly, I got bored, particularly with the powered fixed-wing aircraft. They were so restrictive with the regulations and the rules that it just got boring, and it was also hideously expensive. After doing my homework on all different kinds of aircraft that I could have got involved with, I ended up settling on paramotors and paragliders. I really like the idea of the paraglider, an aircraft so small you can pack it on your back, simply climb up a hill, launch, and then, if the conditions allow it, go flying all day, land, pack it up, and then get a ride home. It doesn't get any better or easier than that. As per usual with me, my ambitions outweighed my budget, so paramotoring was going to be too expensive for me, which is why I decided to start with the paragliding. It was simply a lot cheaper. The most expensive part of paragliding is getting involved in it in the first place. It's getting your certifications done, all your training, and purchasing the equipment. Once that's all done, membership of the association is around $400 a year, and flying the glider itself is free. Some sites require club membership, which can cost a bit, but depending on where you go, other sites, no club membership fees at all. And of course the cost of getting to the sites to fly in the first place. I often get lifts with other people, so that's often free too. As far as doing the training goes, in my experience, it is actually quite difficult. I think half the pilots I went through my training with, after 8 months, still haven't managed to get their licenses. And I've heard of pilots sitting around for years trying to get their licenses. Getting into the air in a paraglider, particularly when you're a rookie, is quite challenging. I learnt this the hard way. The problem with paragliders and inexperience is that they're extremely limited in the conditions that they can fly in. The conditions have to be perfect, and when you're undergoing training with a school, they also have to coincide with the time that you can train and when the instructor is able to train you. This really makes it hard. As an example, when I started paragliding, I set up at Rainbow Beach in Queensland, and in around 3 months, I only managed to do 4 days of training out of the required 8. And I was available nearly every day to fly. So I was going absolutely crazy, thinking I'd get my flying done within a month or two, and instead I hung around for 3 to 4 months, and there was no prospect of me finishing my course. So to get my last 4 days of training done, I made the unpopular decision of switching schools. I decided to go to another place where I thought I was more likely to get some airtime. It was quite a hard decision to make, but it also did pay off. I had my training completed within 2 weeks and was on my way towards getting my PG3. So if you're looking to get into this sport, just be aware that you might get your course done really smoothly and in a very short period of time, or it could be an incredibly frustrating experience. Just be prepared for that. So my initial training was with Jean-Luc in Queensland at Rainbow Beach, and then the second instructor I went to was Lisa Bradley, who was located at Canungra. These 2 instructors were completely different from each other, with Jean-Luc being focused on the coastal stuff and Lisa being a very detail-oriented inland pilot. My first paraglider and harness cost me just over $1,000, both very old. The harness is an Air Extreme, and the paraglider itself was an APCO Vista, quite old. They're very tough, but very outdated. So this was a really bad period for my country. It was a time of drought, fire, then flood, and then plague. As soon as I'd finished my training at Canungra, I had to flee because of the bushfires coming through. So we headed south, and in the remote bush town of Manila, we ended up becoming stranded due to mechanical problems. But on the good side, the nearby Mount Bora is an excellent place to go flying. I got really unlucky here, and on my first flight I got hit by some pretty strong turbulence, which I wasn't experienced enough to control. Now, I wouldn't have a problem with it at all, but at that time, I simply didn't have the active piloting skills developed well enough to handle it. This is why instructors don't fly their students in anything but perfect weather.
I'm good.
So when you're a student, you're ranked as a PG1. And then when you graduate, you become a PG2, which means you can fly, but you have to be supervised by experienced pilots or safety officers. And then finally, when you reach PG3, you can then fly unsupervised. So as a PG2, I found one of the challenges was actually finding people to supervise me. It could be quite difficult. Sometimes you could contact people to come and do it, but then other times you can't. And I found the best thing was simply to rock up at flying sites and then hope someone else turned up. And then when I did, introduce myself and then go from there. After flying around in New South Wales for a while, I headed to South Australia. South Australia is unique in that it doesn't have any instructors or schools, and not even a club, just a small group of pilots that fly together. But here I actually found the most amount of freedom and the best supervision. It only took me about 4 months to build up all the experience, skills and time I needed to go for my PG3 test, and the local senior safety officer was perfectly happy to put me through that. The other thing to know about paragliding is you can spend a lot of time doing something called parawaiting, which is where you sit around watching the weather on a site, hoping that the weather's going to be good enough to go flying. As a rookie, I spent a lot of time parawaiting. 2 out of 3 times I went to a site to fly, I'd be sitting around just waiting for the weather to come on. However, as my experience built up, I became both more capable of handling greater weather conditions and better at judging the weather. So I ended up flying more like 2 out of every 3 times I went to a site. For the most part, the people in this sport are absolutely awesome. I've probably made more friends in my time doing this than I have in any other endeavour I've been involved in. People here, they're just awesome. There are so many nice, helpful people that are passionate about what they do, and they're in the sport because they love it, and they also really enjoy helping others. Personally, I hate big egos and dirty politics, and unfortunately there is also some of that in this sport. It's unfortunate, but it's definitely there and something to be aware of. Politics can be a little bit difficult to avoid with paragliding because there are only certain limited sites that you can fly from in each area, so it can be a bit hard to break away from people when you want to. I'd say from my experience, don't let anything like that put you off though. The vast majority of people are really good, and this sport is awesome. It is the most enjoyable thing I have ever done. I've done a lot of things in my life, and this tops the list. It is so good. You've been seeing clips of my experience of learning to paraglide from PG1 through to PG3. I've actually made a full series of videos from the experience right from my first flight all the way through to my final test. In it, some of the videos are me just flying around with some music in the background. Others are me fully narrating the thing, talking about what I'm experiencing, what I'm strategizing and all the rest. They're all together in a sequential playlist, so check it out. Click on the playlist, have a look through and learn a bit more about what it's like to learn how to paraglide in Australia.